Hi everyone and welcome to another video. I'm Naian and in this video I'm going to be doing the Why Haven't I Read These Books tag, which was created by Crystal, whose channel will be linked down below. I've been tagged by my book soulmate Paula, who will also be linked down below. We always read similar books and we like similar books and we tag one another. It's a thing. It's a lovely thing. Anyway, there are 5 questions to this tag and you talk every time about a book that you haven't read before. And while there are 5 questions, I'm going to give 2 answers to every question. One, well, I would talk about a book, spoilers, that is actually on my physical TBR that I own. There are about 30 to 40 of those in total. And the second book will be one that is on my want to read list. I keep a separate Excel sheet where I write down the book title, the book author, the book genre, whether I own it, notes, a lot of things. If you want me to talk more about my Excel sheets, let me know and I'll do a separate video about that one. But I think there are between 200 and 300 books on there, which is a lot, and sometimes I want to take away books, but hey, that's a whole different thing. Anyway, I would also want every time to talk about a book that is on that list and that I don't actually own. So the first question, let's dive into it, is a classic that you haven't read yet. I haven't read yet, but would love to read A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James. This isn't actually a classic. I think it's a modern classic. To my head, it's a modern classic. It's gone to these mythical proportions of a book that will, in 50 years time, in 100 years time, will still be a thing. Not entirely sure if other people agree with that, but in my head, that is what it is. It won the Man Booker in 2015, and actually there'll be another Man Booker winner in this list in a moment. Anyway, I started reading this book 2 years ago on audio, and it was dense. Marlon James's writing is very dense and I really like it. He's one of my favorite authors, but it was not working on audio and I was really happy to find this copy. I think it was definitely secondhand, but I don't know if I had to buy it or it was in a free library. Anyway, this one is set in Jamaica and there is going to be lots of decades. There's going to be a couple of decades, yes, but there's going to be lots of killing and it's about social injustices, and it's rather big, which is the reason I haven't gotten to it yet. I think it's one of the last 2 Marlon James books that I have to read, and then I'll read all of his body of work, which is very exciting. But this one is kind of scary, if I'm really honest. I mean, it's called 7 Killings, and I don't think it's not only going to be 7. We all know there's going to be more killings than that, and then Marlon James on top of it is writing. Yeah, no, I am looking forward to it though. The other classic that I want to read, and that is daunting for a very different reason, is Water Margin by Naian. Am I saying that correctly? Let me check my notes. Naian. I was kind of close but still butchered it. So this is one of the 4 big Chinese classics. I'll link a video by the bookish line below where she describes those 4 classics in more depth. This one is set in the 12th century. I know, it's very exciting, and it's been written ages ago, which is one of the reasons I would love to write it. A book that has been around for such a long period, there must be something about it, and I'm very curious about that. It's about a group of outlawed men. Are they old men? Don't know. Outlawed people, and they're going to go into the army again, and then they have they're going for battles and stuff. And I heard great things, but I also believe it's going to be a very episodical book where each chapter is really it has its little mini arc, and that usually doesn't really gel with me. I like one big overarching arc and that things kind of flow more. I didn't really like The Three Musketeers, for example, by Alexandre Dumas for that reason. So that is one of the reasons I'm not picking it up now. I don't know, and it's huge. It's a monster. But I would love to read, if not this one, then one of the other big 4 Chinese classics. Let me know if you think that I'll prefer one or the other. But yeah, that's one that I would love to read. Let's go to the next question, and that is a book of fiction that you haven't read yet. I have not read and would love to read La plus secrète memoire des hommes by Mohamed Mbougar Sarr. This is a French book, if you hadn't noticed, and this title would translate literally to The Most Secret Memory of Men. I don't know if it has been translated. I think it would make sense if it had been, because this one won a prestigious French prize last year. Very prestigious. So this one, I would love to read it, but also a little bit big. It's about a young Senegalese writer who discovers a book in Paris, and the writer of that book is very unknown and people don't really know their history. So the young writer decides to dive into that mystery, and I think it's a very, very rich book that talks about a lot of themes, and I'm very, very, very enthusiastic for it. But again, a little bit big, and it's one of those that I think I have to really take my time to enjoy, and I don't have that time right now. But I hope to get to it, like all of these, by the way. The other fiction book that I would love to read is The Boxman by Kobo Abe. So this one was recommended by Tokyo Chemist. She made a video where she described 10 books, maybe 12, somewhere between that. So either 10, 11 or 12 books by Japanese authors that she would recommend, and all of them sounded fascinating. I think I put all of them on my want to read list, and then I read none of them as of yet. But this one was the one that was most interesting because it's about a man that decides, nope, life is not working, and then he lives in a box. And from what I understood, but I think it's a very weird book that you need to know as little as possible about, is that he kind of then describes as his life goes on, but he's still in a box, and what he thinks is happening, what he imagines happening, and what is real, what is not real. It sounds fascinating, but like a lot of Japanese books, I would rather read them in French because it's translated. So who cares what language it's translated to? So I'd rather read it in French because that's good for my French. I am French, if you're new here. So that's one that I would like to get to, a fiction book. Non-fiction, actually the book that I own and want to show you was also recommended by Tokyo Chemist. She's great. And that is Eat the Booba by Barbara Demick. So this one is about the history of Tibet from 1950 onwards mostly. So that's when China claimed sovereignty. They're like, yes, you there, you're ours. And it sounds fascinating about the whole of Tibetan history. I know nothing about it, and I love these historical books that are about historical things and politics and like what it does to a culture also. And Tokyo Chemist said that this book was great and that Barbara Demick's writing and research is fantastic. Barbara Demick herself is not from this place, and she also wrote another book that was fascinating. And this one becomes a little bit more interesting when you realize that we've got the whole Taiwan situation going on as well, which is obviously it's not the same, but there are also bound to be similarities because China is there being big and possessive. So I would love to read this one. The non-fiction that I would love to get to as well is one that is actually not historical. There are lots of books about historical things and geographical and politics that I would love to read. My want to read list is full of those, but one that I wanted to highlight to you is, let me check the author first, The Violin Baker by John Marchese. So this is a book that talks about how violins were made, which you might have guessed from the title. And violin making is a craft. You've got the wood, and I used to play the violin, which is the main reason I'm very interested in this one. To me, instruments in general and violins in specific have a soul. Everyone is special. My violin is very dear to my heart, even though I haven't touched it in ages. So I think this would sound fascinating. It's about the process of making a violin, the history of Violin Maker. I believe there's also discussions, or at least information that comes from a violin maker and how that is. So it sounds fascinating, would love to read it. And it's something, you know, with all of these political and historical books and non-fictions, the world is not really a happy place, and music is one of the things that makes it better, and craft is also one of the things that makes it better. So I think this one sounds lovely, sounds lovely. Let me see, the genre book that you haven't read yet. Ben Okri's The Famished Road. This is the other Man Booker winner. This one book won the Man Booker in 1991, which, incidentally, is the year that yours truly was born. That is not a reason to read it, but it gives a little bit of extra, I have to say. Yeah, The Famished Road, it's magic realism, and I would love to read this. Paula from Draw Your Books was very enthusiastic about it, and this is definitely going to be a book that we absolutely agree on. I know I'm going to love it. Again, it's a slightly bigger one, and it's one, again, that I want to make sure that I'm in a happy place and I don't stuff it in because I have to read it. But I know that if I don't stuff it in because I really want to read it, it's going to stay on my shelves for a very long time, and then one day I will finally pick it up and think, why didn't I pick it up sooner? We all know how this goes. Anyway, as I said, magic realism, it's about a boy that can communicate with spirits, and there's a whole trilogy, so that sounds great. And I love it when books are, how am I gonna explain that? I'm agnostic, and so when stuff happens in books that's the people in the books explain in a this is spiritual kind of thing, or that it's religious or whatever, or that has to do with the beliefs that they have. Me as an agnostic person, I think, oh, but you interpret it that way and it actually is this. But with this book, I think that is going to be a wonderful gray zone of, okay, but is this magic realism? Is this their interpretation? Is the world just like this and I'm just too pragmatic about it? I think that is going to be a very interesting added theme, and I would love to read this. Oh, I've got this lovely stack of books that I would love to read, but unfortunately I'm sitting here filming a YouTube video talking about the books that I would want to read, not actually reading the books that I want to read. Subject for another time. The other genre video that I don't actually own is historical fiction. I have lots of those on my list, and I wanted to talk about Black Sugar by Miguel Bonnefoy. Again, this was a French book originally, as if it's not anymore, and in French the title is Sucre Noir. It was literally translated, and this one is set in a Caribbean village, small Caribbean village, and a treasure comes to shore, and the treasure apparently comes from a boat that was sunk hundreds of years before, and it's kind of about what that gold and what that treasure does to the people throughout a couple of generations, I think, not entirely sure, and kind of discovering like what is treasure, what is happiness. You have gold, okay, but what makes you happy? What is an actual treasure? So yeah, sounds wonderful. Want to read it in French, which actually is a good thing, because I think that there's a lot of books that I would want to read in French, but because I don't have access to them easily, it makes it easy not to buy them directly. It's a good thing. Last question is the book that has been on your TBR the longest. I'm not entirely sure this is the book that has been on my TBR the longest. I think that the moment that I have in head that I associate with getting this book is actually the moment that I read the first book of that trilogy. Anyway, it is the second book in the Book of Trust series called The Secret Commonwealth by Philip Pullman. This is a simultaneously prequel and sequel to his Dark Materials trilogy. Again, it's rather big, but it's a children's book, so I don't think that in this case it's going to be an issue. Anyway, in this book we're going to follow Lyra when she's an adult after his Dark Material things, and there's also another man in there who is the boy that we meet in the first book in this trilogy, and at that time he is 15, I think, and he saves Lyra when she's a baby. There's this age difference between them, and is the reason I haven't read it yet. It's because I heard Mercedes from Mercy's Bookish Musings talk about how at one point he describes how he's always been in love and wanting to be with Lyra maybe not always, but for a very long time, and that time had already started when she was still a teenager. But he's 15 years older, so that's kind of not okay, and the book apparently glosses over that. So that's one of the reasons I haven't read it yet, but realizing that it's been on my shelf so long and that it's still there made me realize that I do want to read this. I think it's going to be blast to get through, and I like this world, I'm interested in this world. So yeah, I think I'm going to pick this up soon, which could be any time between now and 3 months from now. Last book is the book that has probably been on my want to read this the longest. This was difficult to find because I used to be on Goodreads and then it says like a date, but I love Goodreads. went to Storygraph, left Storygraph because I want to keep track of more things. So I have my Excel sheet now, but I don't have a date of when I'm at it. Maybe that could be another thing that I could track. Anyhow, I think that the book that has been on my list the longest is We Were Villains by E. Lockhart. And I remember a friend recommending it to me, and I think that was 6 years ago. And that's about the time that I started reading a lot more, and my want to read list growing a little bit. So this book is set in the US on an island, at least in a secluded place or a house, and we've got a very rich family, and there's going to be lots of drama and secrets becoming not so much secrets anymore. And it sounds like one of those light, fast, dramatic books, and I like to read more historical and, I mean, books that are not necessarily always about heavy things, so I think this one will be a good, like, tongue cleanser, is that a word? Where you just read this fast thing and then you can go to a more difficult subject again. I'm not entirely sure because she recommended it so long ago, and that time we both were reading very different books. More YA, and I have no idea if this one is YA and whether she would still recommend it now. I should ask that maybe to her, and whether I would like it now. I will link her her Instagram channel. It's not a channel. Bookstagram account below, because she has wonderful pictures, and would recommend checking her out as well. Anyway, those were the 10 books that I have not read yet. I don't think they're very big shockers on here, but if there are any that I should prioritize, and please don't say all, because I know I want to prioritize all, let me know. I'd love for you to do this tag. Tokyo Chemist, you are tagged to do this one, as well as Karen from a Roving Reader. And if I haven't tagged you, if you're not one of those two people and no one else has tagged you, please do the video, because tags are fun, and I would love to watch your answers and add more books to my TBR, because yay! I'm gonna stop talking, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.